Zaporozhian Sich is a worth visiting place for those who is interested in Ukrainian history and who wants to see where the courage of the Ukrainian nation came from. In this video, we will tell you about the most interesting things about the origin of the Zaporozhian Sich and show you how the Cossacks' life was organized. We will dive into the exciting history. It's going to be very interesting. Let's get started. According to a legend, in the 16th century, the Ukrainian slaves were tired from the oppression of their masters. The bravest of them ran away and decided to organize their own military defensive formation based on the democracy rules to protect independence and rights of Ukrainians. They were called Cossacks, free independent people. Later they built Zaporozhian Sich. Zaporozhian Sich was formed beyond the rapids, granite ledges of rocks of the Dnieper River on the Khortytsia island. The phrase "beyond the rapids," called in Ukrainian porogamy, was transformed into Zaporizhzhia, and Sich comes from the Ukrainian verb sikty, in English called to cut, which meant to cut the wood. The first settlers chose for the living inaccessible to enemies thickets, where they made cuts, passages free of trees, in Ukrainian called Sich. The historians considered Mitrobai Vishnevetsky to be the founder of the first Zaporozhian Sich in the 16th century. Today recreated historical complex Zaporozhian Sich is a prototype of the original Sich. It was reproduced by the scientists by the found remains. These remains were flooded by the waters of the Kakhovka reservoir on the Dnieper River. The original Sich was about 10 times larger. There were 8 Siches on the territory of Ukraine at different times, 5 Siches on the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region, 2 on the territory of the Kherson region, but one and the very first Zaporozhian Sich was located right here on the Khortytsia island, and Zaporozhian Sich became the most famous. Zaporozhian Sich is a unique historical and cultural complex that shows the image of the Cossack capital and the atmosphere of the Cossacks' time. The construction of the complex began in 2004. This territory has created a unique image, a unique mentality of the Zaporozhian Cossack, a Cossack warrior, a defender of Christian values. This is a person who had a great willpower, an unbending fortitude, and was very respectable. Moreover, the Cossacks were literate. Historians claim that some Cossacks of the Zaporozhian Sich knew up to 12 languages. Sich is the capital of the Cossack lands, but the Cossacks lived not only in the Sich. There was a garrison of about 5,000 persons in the Sich, and the rest lived outside the Sich, on the territory of Zimivniki, house for winter time, or farms. They were engaged in fishing, hunting, agriculture, lived with their wives and children, had a normal life. There were also some Cossacks who lived in the Sich and never married. They took a vow of celibacy, but these were a minority. Zaporozhian Sich consists of 2 parts: the small Kish, trade and craft suburb, and the big Kish, Cossack garrison. The whole town is protected by fortifications, defensive towers. The interior space is also equipped by the Cossack traditions. Cossack kurens, houses where they lived, a forge where metal products were made, pottery with clay products, a tavern, a place where the Cossacks had their meals, and a Greek house, like a hotel, where the ambassadors stayed during their visit to Zaporozhian Sich. Cossack kuren was the house where the Cossacks lived. It was 18 meters long. There were 38 of such kurens. There was always a smell of smoke, in Ukrainian korilo, which came from the smoking stove in the kuren. This smoke was transformed into Ukrainian word kuren. A kuren is a military and a territorial unit, like a district. Cossacks from one locality tried to settle in one kuren on a territorial basis, so each kuren was called like another cities of Ukraine, Cherkasy, Chernigiv or Kaniv kuren. Gun house, in Ukrainian pushkarnya, is the arsenal of the Sich where cannons, weapons, cannonballs, gunpowder stocks were stored. There is the Church of the Intercession of the Blessed Virgin in the center of the Sich. All churches at every Sich at different times were called like that. This church is working, and this is really the central place in the Sich. The main value of this church is the iconostasis, which is over 200 years old. The intercession was considered the patroness of the Cossacks, and the Feast of the Intercession is celebrated today along with the Cossacks' Day on the 14th of October. Now it is also the Day of the Defender of Ukraine. The Cossacks were Orthodox Christians. When the Cossacks retired from military affairs, they often lived in monasteries, donated a lot of money for the activities of churches and monasteries, and thanks to the Zaporozhian Cossacks, the orthodoxy was saved in the Ukrainian lands. This church has a prototype, the Trinity Church in the Sumy region, in the village of Pustovoitivka, built at the expense of the last Ataman Cossack leader Petro Kalnyshevsky. There is a Maidan, central square in front of the church, where the Cossacks gathered, elected their leader, Ataman, by throwing their heads in the air. They resolved the most important affairs of war and peace exactly here. The Ataman was elected by a majority of votes, and this Cossack had no right to refuse the offer to become the Ataman. If you were elected, start to work. The chosen Ataman had to go to a special stage where he was offered a mace, in Ukrainian bulava, a symbol of Cossack power. Cossacks offered him a mace 3 times. Twice he had to refuse, and only for the 3rd time he had the right to take the mace. Then his head was bowed and sprinkled with earth, ashes, or even mud. This was done so he wouldn't be arrogant, remember where he came from, and not exceed his power, such a protector of corruption for him, and the same way he can be removed. The history, traditions, and culture of this region are united in the historical complex Zaporozhian Sich. If you visit this place, you will feel the energy, traditions, and culture of the Khortytsia island. Excursions are organized on the territory of the complex, and we highly recommend to take such an excursion so you could feel better this place and its historical importance. There are performances of the dramatic theater of the Cossack bottle, named Sich Cossacks, on the territory of the Khortytsia Reserve. Modern descendants of the Cossacks, dressed like original Cossacks, demonstrate the fighting art, Cossack weapons, with very stunning and dangerous tricks. It is an exciting performance which is really worth visiting. There is a museum of the Zaporozhian Cossacks history near the historical complex Zaporozhian Sich. The monument to glorious ancestors, Zaporozhian Cossacks, from the thankful descendants for the kept freedom, dignity, and victory. Next to the museum is a high hill with a Ukrainian flag and a cross. There is a very beautiful view of the Dnieper River, the dam, and the Zaporozhian Sich from this hill. Kayaking enthusiasts raft along the picturesque rapids. There is a walking terrace trail with beautiful viewpoints on the territory of the Khortytsia Island Reserve along the Dnieper River. Stone blocks with philosophy quotes of the most famous Ukrainian writer Taras Shevchenko are set along the trail. There is a restaurant of Ukrainian cuisine Zaporozhian Sich not far from the museum of the Khortytsia island, just 1 kilometer away. The restaurant has a colorful interior of the traditional Ukrainian house and a beautiful green territory. The territory of the Khortytsia island is very large and beautiful. Here you can just walk or ride a bike all day long. Also, we saw such a nice gazebo on the Khortytsia island with a beautiful view of the city and the beach opposite the island. More details about Zaporozhian Sich you can find on our website worldwithatwist.com, link in the description below. Don't forget to click the thumb button, comment, share the video if you like it, and subscribe to our channel if you want to get such short and informative overviews about the most interesting places of our planet. World with a Twist. Let's discover the world together!